$500 a day. That's the absurd fine she slapped on me like she truly thought the law would just fold at the sound of her voice. No official letter, no proper notice, no due process, just a piece of printer paper. She whipped up herself filled with rules that existed nowhere except in her own imagination. But what really burned me was that smug, self-satisfied look she wore standing out there in the street with a crowd around her, preaching about community, like she'd been personally chosen to keep order. She acted like her mere presence made her the law. She really believed fear would keep people like me in line, but what she didn't realize, what she still doesn't understand, is that she picked the wrong person to mess with. I wasn't about to back down. Not this time. When her little empire finally collapsed, she'd be the one tallying up the cost of her own arrogance. 2 years back, I moved out here for some peace and quiet, wanting to trade the grind of city life for a slower, friendlier pace. Picture this. I'm Sarah Mitchell, 31, hair pulled back, business casual most days, mostly just blending in, looking like any other unremarkable consultant. Then there's Karen Morrison, 34, president of the Willowbrook Heights, HOA, always dressed to impress every blonde hair in place, running the neighborhood with all the warmth of a Fortune 500 exec. But on this particular October morning, she finally picked the wrong target. I'd bought this empty lot at the end of Maple Street 6 months earlier, just past a little wooded area that runs down to the old creek. Perfect spot for my gardening plans, and I'd done everything by the book. Researched the property, checked the zoning laws, got every single permit signed off by the city. My paperwork was airtight. The trouble started when I began clearing out the mess waist-deep in thorny brambles, sweat running down my back, when Karen came strutting over some rainbow-colored document gripped in her manicured hand, face already set to righteous fury. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing here?" she demanded, parking herself between me and my wheelbarrow, like she expected me to back down on the spot. I peeled off my gloves and tried to be civil. "Morning, Karen, I'm clearing my lot so I can build a storage shed." Her answer, "Well, that's simply not going to happen." She waved her homemade summons in my face and claimed the HOA had just decided at some mysterious emergency board meeting to designate my lot as a protected green space. I asked to see the update and meeting notes. Her story started to wobble. She talked about an emergency session I hadn't even been told about, despite owning the property. I paused my work, feeling something was off, packed up my tools, and watched her glaring at me through her window phone glued to her ear. I knew right then this wasn't over. 3 days later, I came back, still no sign of any new regulations in my mailbox or online, and the city planning office had confirmed my permits were all valid. Karen showed up again this time, flanked by 2 board members, Patricia Webb, who could freeze water with a stare, and David Chin, the accountant, who looked like he wanted to melt into the sidewalk. "Miss Mitchell, you were explicitly told to stop this project," Karen shouted loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Patricia handed me an official fine notice, $500 a day, for unauthorized construction. I looked it over. It was so sloppy it looked like a high school project. "This isn't even legal," I told them. "Where's the board vote approving this?" Karen's face went red, but the other 2 wouldn't meet my eyes. They knew something was off. That afternoon, Karen posted photos of me mid-swing on the HOA's social media group, painting me as some kind of reckless vandal. The comments were brutal, people I'd never even met calling me selfish, saying folks like me ruined neighborhoods. Even Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down jumped in, claiming I was destroying property values. It stung. I started dreading my evening walks, feeling every judgmental stare, but I also started questioning the legality of these supposed new rules. By the following week, I'd had enough. I took a day off and drove to the county courthouse where Betty, the records clerk, helped me pull the HOA documents. And wouldn't you know it, the lot wasn't even part of Willowbrook Heights HOA. According to the official 2008 survey, the HOA boundary ended a full 50 feet before my property line. Years of misunderstanding, probably from some handshake deal that never made it into the books. I was both relieved and furious. Armed with the county map, I knocked on Karen's door. She was out in her rose garden, those spotless gloves for show. "Karen, we need to talk," I said, holding up the boundary survey. Her composure cracked. She went off, claiming I was just exploiting a technicality. I held my ground. "It's not a technicality, Karen. It's the law. Your HOA has zero say over my property." She threatened to call her lawyer and sue me for damages. I just walked away. Through her window, I saw her pacing and yelling into her phone. 2 days later, a city building inspector, Tom Rodriguez, showed up at my lot. I got a complaint about unpermitted construction, he said, looking embarrassed. After checking everything, he shrugged. Permits are valid. This lot's outside the HOA. I don't really get the complaint, to be honest. That same day, Karen's online campaign amped up. She called me a threat to property values and urged neighbors to take action. People I barely knew avoided me at the grocery store. I was practically a pariah. But Karen's power play was about to blow up in her face. One foggy Thursday, I pulled up to meet my contractors, Frank and Joe. 2 old-school guys were waiting with lumber. Karen was already there, blocking the access road, arms crossed. "No more equipment is coming onto this property," she barked. "I've called the police. You're trespassing." Frank, cool as ice, just said, "Ma'am, we've got the work order and permits right here. Karen lost it." Her voice echoing down the street. "This is HOA property. She can't build here." The cops arrived. Officer Martinez, all calm and business, reviewed my documents, double-checked boundaries on his tablet, and listened as Karen's explanations got wilder. Then he shut her down. "Ma'am, Miss Mitchell is within her legal rights. If you interfere again, you'll be cited for disturbing the peace." Karen went sheet white. That's when I realized enough hiding. It was time she found out who I really was. That night, I sat in my office digging into the HOA's records. 10 years in urban planning and municipal law meant I knew exactly where to look. The HOA hadn't filed financial reports for 2 years, a violation that could kill their nonprofit status. Board positions hadn't been properly elected, no minutes on record, and a ton of decisions made by Karen alone. I started talking to neighbors, Mrs. Patterson, the Rodriguez family, even Jim Peterson, a retired attorney down the block. Turns out Karen had been raising fees, threatening folks, and making up rules for years. Nobody knew how to stop her. Then came the twist I never expected. Karen's husband, Mike, knocked on my door. Guy looked wrecked. "Sarah, I need to talk," he said, his hands shaking. Turns out Karen had been falsifying documents, inventing meeting minutes, even moving HOA funds into her own accounts for so-called enforcement activities. Mike handed me proof, emails, fake regulations, transfers, all of it. "I can't be part of this anymore," he said, eyes full of regret. The next morning, I called Lisa Williams, an old friend and now an investigative reporter. As soon as she heard the story, she was on board. "Sarah, this is the kind of local corruption story every reporter dreams of." Together, we dug deeper, confirming everything I'd found, and then some. The real kicker. My property had been bought through a city green space program, specifically set up to keep HOAs from blocking community projects. Karen hadn't just overstepped, she'd interfered with an official city initiative. I reached out to Robert Hayes, the city's director of urban planning, and to Jim Peterson, who'd been dying for a legal showdown. I gathered every scrap of evidence, financial records, emails, maps, official program paperwork, ready for the HOA's emergency meeting that Karen herself had called. Saturday night, the community hall was packed. Karen, in her power suit, had set the stage like she was testifying before Congress. American flag, gavel, the works. She started with her speech about threats to property values and illegal construction, waving photos of my humble shed foundation like it was a nuclear waste site. Then came the fireworks. Lisa showed up with her camera, Jim Peterson with his briefcase, and Robert Hayes flashing his city badge. Karen tried to shut them down. "This is a private HOA meeting," but I stood up. "Actually, it's not. State law requires these meetings to be public when resident issues are discussed." I laid out the evidence, the missing financial reports, the illegal fines, the falsified documents, the city green space program. Robert Hayes backed me up, confirming my lot was city-approved and totally outside HOA boundaries. Jim Peterson declared Karen's actions were potentially criminal. The room exploded. Neighbors were angry, hurt, some embarrassed. When the vote came, Karen was ousted 42-1. Mrs. Henderson stood up to apologize to me in front of everyone. People started sharing stories of how Karen had bullied them too. Karen, cornered and fuming, threw one last tantrum and stormed out. "You'll hear from my lawyer," she yelled. "You'll hear from the DA about the missing money," I shot back. The door slammed behind her. With Karen gone, the community transformed. 6 months later, her house was up for sale. She'd left town, and rumor had it she and Mike had split. My lot became a true community garden, complete with a little resource shed, seed library, and a gathering spot under the old oak. The HOA restructured with real transparency, and fair rules fees dropped. Gardening flourished, people smiled again. Mrs. Patterson became our unofficial garden coach. The Rodriguez kids taught weekend science classes. Even Jim took up beekeeping, which somehow became the new neighborhood obsession. Lisa wrote a story that hit the front page, and soon I was helping other neighborhoods clean up their own HOA messes. Funny how life works, trying to hide who you are only to wind up more yourself than ever. Mike came by sometimes to help plant tomatoes quieter and lighter, without Karen's shadow looming over him. At our first community harvest festival, as I looked out over families, laughing neighbors sharing food, kids running wild, I realized that empty lot, the one that sparked so much trouble, had become the heart of something real. After the crowd thinned out, I sat under the oak tree thinking about the journey. Jim found me there and asked, "Any regrets?" "Not one. I came here trying to disappear, but in the end, sometimes you have to be the person who stands up when no one else will. You know what I mean? The shed was just a shed, but what we built together, that's going to outlast us all." So what do you think, honestly? Did we do the right thing standing up to her? Was it justice or just more drama? I'd love to hear your take. Share your thoughts in the comments. Where's the line between community order and control? And how would you handle it if it happened in your neighborhood?